I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 34, raised in a small town outside Boston where everyone knew everyone's business. My cousin Jason and I are the same age, born just 3 weeks apart, but our lives couldn't have been more different. While I worked summers and saved pennies for college, Jason cruised through life in designer clothes and luxury cars, all courtesy of his doting parents. What I never expected was how our reversed fortunes would teach me the most valuable lesson about success. If you're watching this from somewhere with similar family dynamics, drop your location below and hit subscribe to follow my journey from resentment to unexpected gratitude. Our family home was modest, a 3-bedroom colonial with worn carpets and furniture that had seen better days. But what we lacked in luxury, we made up for in love. Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital while Dad taught high school history. They weren't rich, but they were present. Every night, we gathered around our scratched oak table for dinner, sharing stories about our day. I was 10 when I first noticed the stark difference between my life and Jason's. It was at our annual 4th of July barbecue. While I arrived in hand-me-down shorts and a faded t-shirt, Jason stepped out of Uncle Richard's gleaming Mercedes, wearing brand new Nike sneakers and carrying the latest handheld gaming system that every kid coveted. "Look what Dad got me, just because," Jason announced, showing off the game to our wide-eyed cousins. Something twisted in my stomach as I watched the other kids flock around him. That night, I asked Mom why Uncle Richard and Aunt Elizabeth gave Jason so many things while we had to budget carefully for even small treats. "Your Uncle Richard and your dad took different paths, sweetie," Mom explained, folding laundry with practiced efficiency. They were both smart boys, but Richard was always focused on making money. He went into investment banking, while your dad chose teaching because it fulfilled him. What she didn't say, but I later understood, was that my father had sacrificed financial prosperity for what he considered a more meaningful life. Uncle Richard, on the other hand, had built a successful investment firm that managed millions in assets. His sprawling colonial house with its manicured lawns and pool was featured in a local magazine. The brothers maintained a cordial relationship, but there was always an undercurrent of tension. At family gatherings, Uncle Richard would make subtle comments about Dad's modest lifestyle, while Dad occasionally remarked on Richard's materialistic values. Their wives tried to smooth things over, but the fundamental difference in worldview remained. As a child, I had complicated feelings about Jason. Sometimes I envied his endless stream of toys and games. Other times, I pitied him because while my parents attended every school, play, and sports event, Uncle Richard and Aunt Elizabeth were often absent, sending their housekeeper instead. Jason wasn't malicious, just entitled. He genuinely couldn't understand why everyone didn't live like he did. Once, when visiting our house, he asked with sincere confusion, "Why is your TV so small?" I remember my father's jaw tightening as he explained that we were perfectly happy with our television. By middle school, the pattern was firmly established. Jason received an allowance larger than what I earned babysitting all month. He never wore the same outfit twice in a week. For his 13th birthday, he got a professional-grade mountain bike while I received a second-hand one that Dad had restored. What stung most was how the extended family treated us. At gatherings, relatives would fawn over Jason's every achievement, making the junior varsity team or getting a B+ on a test, while my straight A's and student council presidency received only passing acknowledgement. "Did you see Jason's new laptop? Richard says he needs it for school projects." My grandmother gushed at Thanksgiving dinner, ignoring the fact that I had just won a statewide essay competition. In high school, while I worked weekends at the local grocery store, Jason spent his time at the country club where his family held membership. His social media was filled with photos of golf outings and sailing trips. Meanwhile, I was saving every dollar toward college, knowing my parents could only contribute partially to my education. The summer before senior year brought the first truly painful incident of comparison. At our grandparents' anniversary party, Uncle Richard raised a toast to the future of the Mitchell family, especially Jason, who's already being recruited by top colleges for his golf skills. Everyone applauded while I stood silently, having just been selected as valedictorian of my class, information my parents had proudly shared earlier but which had been completely overshadowed. Later that night, I overheard my aunt telling my mother, It's such a shame Rebecca will probably have to settle for state college. But I suppose that's adequate for most careers. My mother's reply was lost as I fled to the bathroom, tears burning my eyes. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would succeed on my own terms, without anyone's handout. I would prove that hard work meant more than privilege. This determination became my driving force, but it also became a burden I would carry for years to come. When acceptance letters arrived senior year, I received a partial scholarship to Massachusetts State University, enough to make attendance possible with student loans and part-time work. The same week, Jason was accepted to Princeton, despite his mediocre grades. Uncle Richard's substantial alumni donation had presumably helped his application stand out. Princeton has always been a family tradition, Uncle Richard announced at Easter dinner, clapping Jason on the back. The Mitchell name carries weight there. No one mentioned that my father, also a Mitchell, had attended community college before transferring to a state university. The family tradition apparently only applied to the wealthy branch of our family tree. My college experience was a balancing act of academics, work, and minimal sleep. I worked 20 hours weekly at the campus bookstore while maintaining a 3.9 gigapascals in my business program. Weekends weren't for parties, but for catching up on assignments and picking up extra shifts. Meanwhile, Jason's Instagram showed a very different college experience. Fraternity parties, spring break in Cancun, and weekend trips to New York City. His apartment near campus was professionally decorated and featured in a local lifestyle magazine as an example of luxury student living. During sophomore year, I met Trevor, a pre-law student who worked in the library. We connected over shared ambition and midnight study sessions. For almost a year, we built a relationship around our mutual drive for success. We're good together because we both get it, Trevor said one night as we quizzed each other for finals. The hustle, the sacrifice, it's all for the future. But by junior year, even Trevor grew frustrated with my relentless schedule. When do we just live, Rebecca? He asked after I canceled our anniversary dinner to complete a group project. There's more to life than perfect grades and resume building. We broke up a month later when he accused me of loving success more than him. Perhaps he was right. I couldn't risk anything interfering with my goals. Every achievement felt like a necessary step toward proving my worth in a world that seemed to reward those who had never worked for anything. Summer before senior year brought cousin Melissa's wedding, an extravagant affair at a historical mansion. I arrived directly from my marketing internship, exhausted but proud of the connections I was building. During the reception, I found myself at a table with elderly relatives who immediately began singing Jason's praises. Did you hear Jason's been offered a position at Richard's firm after graduation? Starting in management too, Aunt Patricia exclaimed. Well, I just completed a competitive internship at Abbott Marketing, I offered. They've hinted at a job offer after graduation. How nice, dear, she replied dismissively before turning back to another relative. As I was saying about Jason, I excused myself and found refuge on the venue's terrace, where my mother eventually located me. They don't mean to ignore your accomplishments, sweetheart, she said gently. Don't they? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Jason's being handed a management position in a company he's never worked a day in, and everyone acts like he's a self-made success story. My mother looked pained. Your path is different, but that doesn't make it less valuable. Different indeed. After graduation, I accepted a position as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized firm in Boston. The salary barely covered my apartment share and student loan payments, but it was a foot in the door. Jason, meanwhile, moved directly into a corner office at Uncle Richard's firm, with a salary triple mine. His parents gifted him a downtown penthouse as a graduation present, while I scraped together enough for a security deposit on a tiny apartment shared with 2 roommates. That Christmas, I returned home with news of my first big project at work. My parents listened attentively until Uncle Richard's family arrived, immediately dominating the conversation with tales of Jason's business acumen. He's a natural, Uncle Richard boasted as Jason texted on his phone, barely engaged in the conversation. Already closed a major account last month. No one asked about my work or acknowledged the long hours I was putting in to prove myself. The familiar feeling of invisibility settled over me as I helped Mom clear the dishes. Later, in the kitchen, I overheard Uncle Richard telling Dad, "You must be disappointed. Rebecca didn't aim higher than marketing." Not exactly a prestigious field, the gulf between my parents and me widened that night. I couldn't understand why they never defended me against these comparisons. Why they seemed to accept that Jason's path was somehow superior. It would be years before I recognized their complicated feelings of inadequacy beside Richard's wealth. Their struggle to reconcile pride in my independence with worry about my financial security. As I drove back to Boston after the holidays, I made another vow. I would limit my attendance at family gatherings. Each one left me feeling more inadequate, more invisible, despite working harder than Jason ever had. The space between my family and me grew, one missed Sunday dinner at a time. My early career was a series of small triumphs overshadowed by constant exhaustion. While entry-level positions are never easy, mine seemed particularly punishing. My boss, Daniel Freeman, was brilliant but demanding, often sending emails at 2 a.m. expecting immediate responses. "Marketing is a 24/7 business, Rebecca," he would say, when I looked particularly tired. "If you want success, you need to be available whenever inspiration strikes." I believed him, working 60-hour weeks while watching colleagues with connections advance more quickly. Meanwhile, Jason's social media showcased business trips to Europe, meetings with high-profile clients, and industry awards, all within his first year at Uncle Richard's firm. During a rare weekend visit home, I discovered that Jason had been given partial ownership of the family business. A 15% stake to start, my mother mentioned casually as we prepared Sunday dinner. "Richard wants to groom him as his successor." My knife slipped, nearly cutting my finger as I chopped carrot. 15%? Just handed to him? I couldn't keep the incredulity from my voice. That must be worth millions. Mom looked uncomfortable. "Your uncle worked hard to build that company, Rebecca. He can pass it on however he chooses." "And what exactly has Jason done to deserve any of it?" I challenged. "Family businesses are different," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "Besides, you've always been independent. Would you even want something handed to you?" Her words stung because they contained a partial truth. I did value earning my way, but the assumption that I didn't deserve the same advantages as Jason felt like a betrayal. 6 months later, my career faced its first major setback. I had been leading a campaign for a significant client, my first real chance to prove myself. After weeks of late nights and sacrificed weekends, the client abruptly pulled out, citing a better offer from a competitor. Daniel called me into his office, his disappointment palpable. "I expected better, Rebecca. This account was crucial for our quarterly numbers. I did everything possible. I defended myself. Their decision was about price, not quality. Results matter, not excuses," he replied coldly. "You're on probation until you bring in a new client of equal value." That night, I called Andrew, whom I'd been dating for a few months after meeting at a professional networking event. As a software engineer, he understood workplace pressure but maintained healthier boundaries than I did. "It's not fair to blame you for factors outside your control," he said after listening to my tearful explanation. "Your boss sounds toxic." "Maybe," I admitted. "But I need this job. The student loans won't pay themselves." The contrast between my precarious position and Jason's unearned security became even more stark that summer when he married Amber Collins, daughter of another wealthy family, in a wedding that graced the society pages of Boston magazines. The estimated cost would have paid off all my student loans with money to spare. I attended alone, having decided against bringing Andrew after Uncle Richard implied the invitation didn't include casual dates. The ceremony took place at a historic seaside mansion, with white roses flown in from Ecuador and a 10-piece orchestra. During the reception, I overheard guests discussing Jason's recent promotion to senior vice president, just 2 years into his career. Richard says he's never seen such natural business instinct, a woman in designer silk remarked to her companion. The company stock is up 12% since Jason joined management. I nearly choked on my champagne, knowing from my occasional conversations with Aunt Elizabeth that Uncle Richard still made all significant business decisions, Jason's role was largely ceremonial, attending meetings and taking clients to golf outings, while the experienced executive team handled actual operations. That night, alone in my hotel room, I called Andrew and finally broke down. "I've worked every day since I was 16, I sobbed. No vacations, no splurges, nothing but work and saving. And Jason just exists, and everything falls into his lap." "I know it feels unfair," Andrew said gently, "but you're building something real. Skills, experience, resilience, those can't be handed to someone." His words helped, but the resentment continued to build, creating a growing distance between me and my family. I began declining holiday invitations, citing work commitments that sometimes were real and sometimes weren't. My parents noticed, making increasingly concerned phone calls that I answered with decreasing frequency. The one bright spot was my relationship with Andrew. Unlike my previous boyfriends, he admired my ambition without feeling threatened by it. When I finally received my first promotion to marketing manager, he organized a surprise celebration dinner. "To earning it the hard way," he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. "Sometimes I wonder if the hard way is worth it," I admitted, the weight of years of comparison heavy on my shoulders. He took my hand across the table. "The hard way means it's truly yours. No one can ever take that from you." As my career slowly advanced, I began to build a life separate from my family's expectations and comparisons. I developed close friendships with colleagues who understood professional struggle. I created a chosen family of people who valued me for who I was, not who I was related to or what I had achieved. It was at a professional conference that I met Grace Bennett, a marketing executive 20 years my senior who would become my mentor. After hearing my presentation on digital strategy, she invited me to coffee. "You have exceptional insight," she said, stirring her latte. "But you're pushing too hard, like you have something to prove." Her perceptiveness startled me. "Is it that obvious?" She smiled knowingly. "I recognize the signs because I lived them. Let me guess. Family expectations? Sibling rivalry? Cousin rivalry," I corrected, then found myself sharing the condensed version of my lifelong competition with Jason. Grace listened intently before responding. "Success built on resentment will hollow you out eventually. You need to decide what achievement means for you, not in comparison to someone else." Her words lodged in my mind, challenging me to examine my motivations in a way I never had before. But before I could fully process this new perspective, my company announced restructuring due to financial difficulties. Suddenly, everything I'd worked for was in jeopardy. Andrew proposed on an ordinary Tuesday evening in our apartment. No elaborate production, just sincere words and a simple solitaire that had belonged to his grandmother. "I don't need fancy gestures or perfect timing," he said as I stared at the ring in shock. "I just need you, Rebecca. Will you marry me?" Our wedding reflected our values and financial reality. A small ceremony at a local garden with 60 guests, a reception at a neighborhood restaurant, and flowers arranged by Andrew's sister. We paid for everything ourselves, proud of creating a day that truly represented us. Jason sent an impersonal gift but didn't attend, citing a last-minute ski trip to Aspen that couldn't be rescheduled. My parents seemed more disappointed by his absence than I was. "He could have made the effort," Mom said, unusually critical of her nephew. Perhaps she was finally seeing the imbalance that had defined our relationship for years. Married life brought a newfound stability. Andrew and I moved to a slightly larger apartment, combining our incomes to create a comfortable, if modest, lifestyle. We budgeted carefully, gradually building savings while still tackling my remaining student loans. 9 months after our wedding, Jason and Amber announced they were expecting their first child. The baby shower, organized by Aunt Elizabeth, featured custom crystal favors and a caterer from a Michelin-starred restaurant. "It's a bit excessive," my mother admitted as we drove home afterward. This small acknowledgement felt like a significant shift in her perspective. When baby Sophia arrived, she was welcomed with gifts that included a custom-designed nursery, a college fund already seeded with $100,000, and a diamond bracelet engraved with her birth date. Meanwhile, Andrew and I were discussing whether we could afford to start a family. My company's restructuring having resulted in stagnant wages despite my increased responsibilities. Maybe we should wait another year, I suggested one night. Spreadsheets of our finances open on the laptop. Build up more savings first. We could wait forever trying to create perfect conditions, Andrew countered gently. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. But before we could resolve the question, another family gathering forced a confrontation with the ongoing disparity between Jason's life and mine. It was at my parents' anniversary celebration that Jason announced his latest acquisition, a 5-bedroom house in an exclusive neighborhood, a gift from his parents to accommodate their growing family, as Amber was expecting their second child. You should see the wine cellar, Jason boasted, showing photos on his phone. And the pool house is bigger than most people's actual houses. I excused myself to the bathroom, where tears of frustration finally broke through. Andrew found me there minutes later. This is never going to end, is it? I asked, wiping my eyes. No matter how hard I work, how much I achieve, I'll never catch up to what's just handed to him. Andrew sat beside me on the edge of the bathtub. Do you really want to catch up? Or do you want to be free of the comparison? His question hit me like a revelation. For years, I'd been running a race nobody had actually entered me in, measuring myself against a standard I hadn't chosen. That night, after returning to our apartment, I experienced my first real breakdown. Years of suppressed frustration poured out as I sobbed in Andrew's arms. It's not just about the things I tried to explain between tears. It's about what they represent. My family values Jason more, has always valued him more, even though he's never worked for anything. Your family loves you, Andrew said firmly. But they're human, with blind spots and biases. You can't make your self-worth dependent on their ability to see your value. This conversation marked a turning point. With Andrew's support, I began making conscious decisions to prioritize my mental health over family obligations. I limited visits to quarterly rather than monthly. I muted Jason's social media accounts. I invested more deeply in friendships that nurtured rather than diminished me. Grace Bennett became increasingly important in this new phase of my life. Over lunches and occasional weekend hikes, she helped me reshape my definition of success. The most successful people I know aren't the wealthiest or most powerful, she told me. They're the ones at peace with themselves, doing work they believe in with people they respect. Under her guidance, I began setting boundaries at work as well, focusing on quality rather than quantity of hours. To my surprise, this approach improved my performance rather than hindering it. Then came news that would test my new perspective. My company announced another round of layoffs due to continued financial struggles. Despite my contributions, my position was vulnerable. Years of sacrifice and advancement suddenly felt precarious. The foundation of my professional identity threatened. What if I lose everything I've worked for? I asked Andrew one sleepless night. You won't lose everything, he assured me. Skills, experience, relationships, those go with you wherever you go. You've built those yourself. No one can take them away. As I waited to learn my fate at work, an unexpected call came from an unlikely source. A call that would begin the next chapter in both my career and my relationship with Jason. Uncle Richard's heart attack came without warning. One moment, he was closing a major deal. The next, he was being rushed to the hospital. The family gathered at the cardiac unit, tension thick in the sterile air. For once, Jason looked utterly lost, his usual confidence replaced by naked fear. He's going to need bypass surgery, Aunt Elizabeth explained, her voice hollow, and a significant recovery period afterward. The implications hung unspoken in the air. Uncle Richard was the undisputed leader of his investment firm. Without him, leadership would fall to Jason will step up as interim CEO, Aunt Elizabeth announced the next day. Richard insists the company stays in family hands. I watched Jason's face pale slightly. For perhaps the first time in his life, real responsibility had landed on his shoulders. Responsibility he couldn't charm or spend his way out of. 2 weeks later, still waiting to hear about my own job security, I received an unexpected phone call. Rebecca? It's Jason. His voice sounded different, strained, uncertain. Is Uncle Richard okay? I immediately asked, assuming the worst. Dad's recovering. It's the company. I need your help. The admission clearly cost him. In 30 years, Jason had never asked me for anything. My help? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "You've always been good with figuring things out," he said vaguely. "Could we meet for coffee, please?" Curiosity overcame my initial reluctance. The next day, I met Jason at a quiet cafe halfway between our workplaces. He looked disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, his designer clothes slightly rumpled. "Thank you for coming," he said, fidgeting with his coffee cup. I didn't know who else to ask. Over the next hour, the truth emerged. Jason was drowning. Uncle Richard's system of running the company had been largely in his head. Key client relationships depended on personal connections Richard had cultivated over decades. Major decisions had always been made by Richard with minimal documentation or process. "Everyone's looking to me for answers I don't have," Jason admitted, vulnerability replacing his usual bravado. "The executive team knows I'm in over my head. They're waiting for me to fail." My initial reaction was vindication. Finally, Jason faced a challenge he couldn't solve with his name or his father's money. But looking at his genuine distress, something unexpected stirred. Compassion. "What specifically do you need help with?" I asked, opening my laptop. Relief washed over his face. "Everything. Financial projections, client retention strategies, team management." We spent 3 hours in that cafe, creating a basic crisis management plan. I drew on my marketing experience, but also on years of solving problems with limited resources, something Jason had never learned to do. "Why are you helping me?" he asked as we prepared to leave. After everything, the way the family always compared us, I considered the question carefully. Because despite everything, we're family. And maybe it's time to break the cycle. Over the next few weeks, I spent evenings helping Jason navigate his new responsibilities. I created spreadsheets tracking client relationships, drafted communication templates, and coached him through difficult conversations with the executive team. Andrew supported my decision, even when it meant less time together. "You're doing something important," he said, building a bridge instead of a wall. Then Uncle Richard was cleared to return home earlier than expected. His recovery was progressing well, but he wasn't yet ready to resume his full workload. His first day back in the office part-time coincided with the quarterly board meeting, where Jason was scheduled to present the company's performance under his leadership. I received a panicked text from Jason that evening. "Dad saw the numbers. Emergency family meeting tomorrow." The gathering at Uncle Richard and Aunt Elizabeth's home was tense. Jason sat ashen-faced at the dining table, while Uncle Richard paced despite his doctor's orders to rest. "A 17% drop in new business," Richard fumed. "2 major clients threatening to leave. Operational costs up 12%. "What the hell happened, Jason?" For a moment, Jason looked like a scared child rather than a 34-year-old executive. "I tried to maintain everything the way you would have." "Clearly you didn't," Richard interrupted. "This company was running like clockwork before my heart attack." "Richard, your blood pressure," Aunt Elizabeth cautioned, but he waved her concern away. I sat silently beside my parents, an observer to the family drama, until Jason unexpectedly looked to me. "Rebecca's been helping me sort through the challenges," he said, a note of desperation in his voice. All eyes turned to me. Uncle Richard's expression was skeptical. "Marketing expertise won't fix fundamental business mismanagement," he said dismissively. Something in me snapped. With respect, Uncle Richard. The problems didn't start with Jason. They started with a company entirely dependent on one person making every decision. No documentation, no succession planning, no systems. A heavy silence fell. No one in the family had ever spoken to Richard this way. "You're out of your depth, Rebecca," he finally said, though with less certainty. "Actually, she's right," said a new voice. Thomas Blanchard, Richard's longtime friend and company CFO, had joined us. "Richard, we've been telling you for years that the company needed better infrastructure. This situation just exposed the weakness that was already there." The conversation that followed was painful but necessary. It became clear that despite appearances, the company had been facing challenges before Richard's heart attack. Jason's inexperience had simply accelerated existing problems. As decisions were made about bringing in an outside CEO temporarily and creating proper management systems, I noticed Jason slipping away to the back patio. I followed, finding him staring blankly at the swimming pool. "I failed," he said simply. "First, real test, and I completely failed. The company was set up for you to fail," I corrected. "No one could have succeeded under those circumstances." He laughed bitterly. "You probably would have. Maybe. Maybe not. But I've had years of experience solving problems with limited resources. You never had the opportunity to develop those skills. Because everything was handed to me," he acknowledged, the realization seeming to hit him freshly. I never had to figure anything out for myself. This moment of clarity led to another revelation. Jason had started drinking heavily to cope with the pressure. What had begun as a glass of whiskey to calm his nerves had escalated to nearly a bottle nightly. Amber had threatened to take the children and stay with her parents if he didn't get help. "I don't know how to fix any of this," he admitted, vulnerability replacing his usual confidence. "Start by talking to someone professional," I suggested. "I know a therapist who specializes in executive stress and addiction issues." The fact that Jason took down the information rather than dismissing the suggestion showed how significantly the ground had shifted beneath him. For the first time in our lives, we were having a genuine conversation as equals, not as the golden child and the afterthought. As we rejoined the family, I noticed my parents watching our interaction with curious expressions. Something was changing in the family dynamic, subtle but unmistakable. The pedestals and pits that had defined our relationships for decades were beginning to level into something more balanced. 2 days after the family meeting, I received news. Not only was I keeping my job through the restructuring, but I was being promoted to Director of Digital Strategy. My innovative approach to our biggest clients' online presence had increased their conversion rates by 42%. Saving both their account and potentially our company. "Your performance under pressure has been exemplary," Daniel told me during the announcement. "We need leadership that can navigate uncertainty." The irony wasn't lost on me. As Jason's professional life crumbled, mine was finally gaining momentum. The promotion came with a substantial raise in equity options, finally providing financial breathing room after years of careful budgeting. When I shared the news with Andrew, he immediately suggested celebrating. "This calls for the good wine we've been saving," he declared, pulling out the bottle we'd received as a wedding gift. "It feels strange to celebrate when Jason's struggling," I admitted. Andrew studied me thoughtfully. "Your success and his challenges are separate things. One didn't cause the other." His perspective helped me accept my achievement without guilt. That weekend, I was featured in a business publication highlighting emerging leaders in marketing. The article praised my innovative approach to digital strategy and noted my rapid rise despite the challenging economic climate. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard had hired Martin Walsh, a seasoned CEO from outside the family, to stabilize the company. Jason was demoted to a learning role, shadowing different department heads to gain the comprehensive understanding he lacked. My mother called one evening, her voice tight with concern. "Amber left with the children," she said without preamble. "Jason's drinking has gotten worse." The news saddened, but didn't surprise me. Jason's entire identity had been built around effortless success. Without it, he seemed unable to cope. "Is he getting help?" I asked. "Richard arranged for a treatment program, but Jason refuses to go. Says he can handle it himself." 3 weeks later, at a small dinner at my parents' house, I saw firsthand how far Jason had fallen. He arrived late, smelling of alcohol, though it was barely 7 p.m. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his usual meticulous appearance neglected. Throughout dinner, he checked his phone constantly, barely engaging in conversation. "The penthouse sold quickly," my mother mentioned carefully. "Jason's new apartment must be quite a change." "It's temporary," Jason replied sharply. "Once the company stabilizes, I'll be back in my rightful position." The conversation grew increasingly tense as Jason drank more wine, eventually leading to him snapping at my father over a gentle suggestion about professional development courses. "I don't need advice from someone who settled for teaching high school," he said bitterly. "Some of us were meant for bigger things." The hurt on my father's face ignited a protective anger in me. That settling gave me a father who was actually present, I replied, years of resentment sharpening my words. Who taught me that work ethic matters more than handouts? Jason stormed out, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind. He's not himself, Aunt Elizabeth said weakly. Or maybe this is who he's always been when things don't go his way, I suggested, immediately regretting my harshness when I saw her pained expression. 2 days later, Jason hit rock bottom. He was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a parked vehicle. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the incident made local news, creating public embarrassment on top of his private struggles. Uncle Richard called a family intervention. Jason sat sullenly in his parents' living room as each of us expressed concern and urged him to accept help. When my turn came, I spoke from unexpected personal connection. I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough, I said quietly, for different reasons than yours. But I recognize the pain. There's no shame in needing help to find your footing. Something in my words seemed to reach him. After everyone had spoken, Jason agreed to enter a 30-day residential treatment program. As the family prepared to leave, he asked if I would stay behind for a moment. Why did you help me with the company? He asked once we were alone. You could have let me crash and burn. After how the family always treated you compared to me, no one would have blamed you because I know what it feels like to struggle alone, I replied honestly. And despite everything, I never wanted to see you fail. I just wanted us both to have a fair chance. I never saw it before, he admitted. How different things were for us. It all seemed normal. Like I deserved everything I got. It was the first genuine conversation we'd ever had. A fragile foundation for a new kind of relationship. The next day, I received an unexpected email from a former colleague who had moved to a prestigious firm. They were looking for someone to head their new digital innovation department and had been impressed by my recent feature in the business publication. After careful consideration and discussions with Andrew, I accepted the position. The role came with significant responsibility, but also greater creative freedom and a compensation package that finally reflected my experience and abilities. At my farewell dinner with Grace, she raised her glass in toast to creating success on your own terms. I couldn't have done it without your guidance, I told her sincerely. She shook her head. I merely pointed out what was already there. You did the hard work of redefining success for yourself. As Jason entered treatment and I started my new position, an unexpected balance began to emerge between our parallel lives. Not the false equality of identical outcomes, but the authentic balance of each finding our own path. For the first time, we were both facing genuine challenges and real opportunities, neither artificially elevated nor deliberately hampered by family dynamics beyond our control. 1 year passed, bringing changes none of us could have predicted. My new role had expanded my professional horizons beyond marketing into broader business strategy. The company valued my perspective as someone who understood both traditional approaches and innovative methodologies, often positioning me as a bridge between established executives and younger team members. Andrew and I had finally begun seriously planning for a family, my increased financial stability allowing us to purchase our first home, a modest but comfortable townhouse with an extra bedroom for the child we hope to have. Jason, meanwhile, had completed his 30-day treatment program and continued with outpatient therapy and regular AA meetings. His transformation wasn't instantaneous or without setbacks, but it was genuine. He had moved into a small apartment near his children, negotiating shared custody with Amber, who remained skeptical but cautiously supportive of his recovery efforts. Most surprisingly, he had declined Uncle Richard's offer to return to the family firm, instead launching a small consulting business focused on helping family-owned companies create succession plans, using his own experience as both cautionary tale and learning opportunity. I need to build something myself, he had explained when announcing his decision at a family dinner. Something I earned through actual work. Uncle Richard had been initially disappointed, but gradually came to respect Jason's choice, particularly as the consulting business began to show promise through Jason's unexpected talent for honest conversation about difficult business realities. When Jason asked if I would be willing to meet monthly to discuss business strategies and marketing approaches, I agreed. Our first session at a local coffee shop was awkward. Years of complicated history sitting between us like an uninvited guest. I don't really know how to do this, Jason admitted, gesturing vaguely between us. The cousin thing, the business thing, any of it. Maybe we just try being honest, I suggested. No family expectations, no comparisons. Just two professionals sharing expertise. That approach proved surprisingly effective. Over months of regular meetings, we developed a working relationship that gradually evolved into something resembling friendship. Jason had insights into client psychology and relationship building that complemented my analytical approach, while I could offer strategies for sustainable growth that his privileged background had never taught him to consider. At Thanksgiving, the family gathered at my parents' home for the first time in years. The shifting power dynamics were subtle but unmistakable. Uncle Richard, still recovering from a second minor cardiac event, was more subdued. Aunt Elizabeth showed genuine interest in my career developments rather than merely inquiring politely before changing the subject. Most significantly, my parents seemed to stand taller, speak more confidently in family discussions. Dad even gently contradicted Richard during a discussion about educational approaches, something I had rarely witnessed in decades of family gatherings. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside while we washed dishes. "We owe you an apology," she said quietly. "For years, we didn't stand up for you the way we should have when Richard and Elizabeth constantly elevated Jason. You were in a difficult position," I acknowledged, though the validation of my long-held feelings brought unexpected tears. "That's no excuse," she insisted. "We were so worried about keeping peace in the family that we let them make you feel less than. You deserved better from us." This long-overdue recognition helped heal a wound I hadn't realized was still so raw. Later that evening, I found myself alone with Uncle Richard on the back porch, an awkward silence stretching between us until he finally spoke. "Martin tells me your marketing consultation for the firm has been invaluable," he said, referring to the occasional advisory work I did for his company. "Says you understand the changing landscape better than consultants twice your age." "I appreciate that," I replied cautiously. He looked at me directly, something he had rarely done in the past. "I was wrong about you, Rebecca. For many years. I assumed because you didn't have the advantages Jason had, you couldn't achieve at the same level." He paused. I failed to recognize that those very advantages were what held him back. The acknowledgement was imperfect, still framed in comparison to Jason, but represented a significant shift in Uncle Richard's worldview nonetheless. The true test of these changing dynamics came at Christmas, when Jason announced his consulting business had secured its first major client, a regional manufacturing company, looking to transition leadership to the next generation. "It's not a huge contract," he said, "but they chose me based on my proposal, not my last name." The pride in his voice was different from his old arrogance, quieter, more grounded in reality. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Aunt Elizabeth said, but then immediately turned to me. "And Rebecca, tell us more about your Innovation Award. Your mother mentioned it was quite prestigious." This balanced acknowledgement of both our achievements felt revolutionary in a family that had always operated with a clear favorite. As winter turned to spring, Jason asked for my help with a complex client situation. We met at his modest office, a far cry from his former corner suite, but organized and functional. "I'm struggling with how to tell the founder that his son isn't ready for leadership," Jason explained. "It's complicated by my own history." "Because you were that unprepared son," I observed. He nodded, running a hand through his hair, now showing early traces of gray. "Exactly. I don't want to project my experience onto their situation, but I also know firsthand the damage caused by promoting someone before they're ready." "Maybe that's precisely why your perspective is valuable," I suggested. "You've lived both sides, being given responsibility without preparation, and now earning your way through actual experience." Our conversation extended through the afternoon, exploring nuances of family business dynamics with a depth neither of us could have managed a year earlier. As I prepared to leave, Jason asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think we could ever have been friends if things had been different from the beginning?" I considered this carefully. "I think we're becoming friends now. Maybe not despite our history, but because we've both learned from it." The summer brought my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, a simple garden party that nevertheless drew the extended family together. As I helped arrange flowers on the patio tables, I overheard my father speaking with Uncle Richard. "I've always admired how you raised Rebecca to stand on her own 2 feet," Richard was saying, sincerity evident in his voice. I thought I was doing Jason a favor by smoothing his path, but in reality, I denied him the chance to develop resilience. Dad's reply was gentle but firm. "We all do our best with the wisdom we have at the time, Richard. What matters is being willing to learn and adjust." Later, as Andrew and I drove home, he noted, "Your family feels different now, less hierarchical." "We're finding a new balance," I agreed. "It's like we're all finally seeing each other clearly for the first time." The most significant evidence of transformation came when Jason's consulting business faced its first major challenge: a potential client backing out of a significant contract at the last minute, threatening his fledgling company's financial stability. Rather than turning to his parents for a bailout, Jason developed an alternative proposal for a different client, working through several sleepless nights to create a presentation that ultimately won him an even more valuable contract. "I wouldn't have had the confidence to pivot like that before," he told me over coffee after securing the deal. "But now I know I can solve problems without someone rescuing me." The genuine pride in his accomplishment reflected a fundamental shift in his self-concept, from someone who deserved success to someone who earned it through effort and resilience. As for me, the freedom from constant comparison had allowed my career to flourish in unexpected ways. I had been invited to speak at industry conferences, mentor emerging professionals, and contribute to strategic planning at levels previously unimaginable. More importantly, I had developed a healthier relationship with achievement itself, valuing the process and impact rather than using success merely as validation of my worth. Andrew noticed the change one evening as I closed my laptop at a reasonable hour instead of working late into the night. "You seem more at peace," he observed, "even with more responsibility than ever before." "I'm not trying to prove anything anymore," I realized aloud. "I'm just doing work I believe in, as well as I can do it." That simple shift, from external validation to internal standards, had transformed not just my career satisfaction, but my entire approach to life. The irony wasn't lost on me. In releasing the need to prove my worth in comparison to Jason, I had finally achieved the success I had always sought. Today, at 34, I hold an executive position at one of Boston's most innovative marketing firms. My team has won industry recognition for campaigns that blend data-driven strategy with authentic storytelling. I work challenging but reasonable hours, maintaining time for my marriage, friendships, and the baby Andrew and I are expecting in the spring. Jason's consulting practice has grown steadily, now employing 3 people besides himself. He specializes in helping family businesses create sustainable succession plans that balance family dynamics with business needs. He and Amber haven't reconciled romantically, but they've developed a healthy co-parenting relationship. He lives in a comfortable but modest home, purchased with his own earnings rather than family money. Our family gatherings, once tense affairs marked by unspoken hierarchies, have evolved into more balanced interactions. Uncle Richard, still opinionated but significantly humbled by health challenges, and the near collapse of his company under Jason's unprepared leadership, no longer dominates conversations. My parents speak with newfound confidence, their contributions valued rather than overshadowed. Most significantly, Jason and I have developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect. We meet monthly, sometimes discussing business, sometimes simply catching up on life. The bitter envy and entitled superiority that once defined our relationship have been replaced by an authentic connection neither of us could have imagined in our younger years. Last month, at a family dinner celebrating my father's retirement, Jason raised his glass in toast to Robert Mitchell, who taught me more about success through his example than any business school ever could. A man who measured achievement not by wealth or status, but by integrity and positive impact. The sincere words from my once dismissive cousin brought tears to my father's eyes, and mine. They represented a profound shift in Jason's understanding of value and accomplishment. Later that evening, Jason and I found ourselves alone on the porch swing, watching fireflies emerge in the summer twilight. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been different?" he asked. If our parents had treated us the same from the beginning, I considered the question carefully. I used to think about that constantly. Now I'm not so sure I would change things, even if I could. Really? He seemed surprised. The struggles made me who I am, I explained. They taught me resilience, self-reliance, creativity with limited resources. All skills that serve me well now. Would I have developed those if everything had been handed to me? Jason nodded slowly. And I might have learned those lessons earlier if things hadn't been so easy. The hard way turned out to be the better way. Not always, I admitted. The lack of support was genuinely painful, and some opportunities really were closed to me because of finances. But overall, yes, I'm grateful for the person those challenges shaped me into. This realization has been perhaps the most unexpected gift of my journey, what once seemed like the greatest injustice of my life. Being forced to work harder for everything while watching Jason receive effortless abundance ultimately provided me with the very qualities that led to sustainable success. Jason's privilege, which I envied for decades, proved to be a handicap in disguise. It deprived him of the opportunity to develop resilience, problem-solving abilities, and the confidence that comes from overcoming genuine obstacles. When real challenges finally arrived, he lacked the emotional muscles to navigate them. I've learned that true success comes not from external validation or comparison to others, but from building a life aligned with your own values. My earlier fixation on catching up to Jason's material advantages blinded me to the authentic achievements I was creating through determination and grit. The peace I've found comes from releasing the weight of comparison and resentment I carried for so long. Those emotions served a purpose in fueling my ambition, but ultimately became burdens limiting my happiness and perspective. At our most recent family gathering, a casual barbecue celebrating summer's end, I watched Jason teaching his son to grill, while my parents chatted easily with Uncle Richard about travel plans. The scene would have been unimaginable 5 years ago, when rigid family hierarchies and unspoken tensions dominated every interaction. What changed wasn't our circumstances, but our perceptions. Jason discovered that earned achievement brings deeper satisfaction than handed privilege. I learned that defining success on my own terms brings more fulfillment than chasing external validation. Our parents and extended family recognized that different paths can lead to equally valuable outcomes. As I close this chapter of my story, I'd love to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and unequal treatment. Have you struggled with similar comparisons in your life? How did you navigate feelings of resentment or unfairness? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more authentic conversations about family, career, and personal growth. Remember that your worth isn't determined by comparison to others, but by the integrity and purpose with which you build your unique path. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find peace in your own story, however complicated it might be.